Hi, I'm Harrison and welcome to part 2 of my shelter building videos. For this one, I'm going to be building a mid-level shelter that's low enough that it can get a group underneath, but it's going to keep some warmth in case the weather turns. I'm going to be using a timber hitch to a figure of 8 back on itself to create some tension. Using a tarp and a rope for a ridge line, let's get started. Starting this one with my timber hitch, I'm going to be working around head height. I'm going to take my working end of my line around, over itself, and then back to twist around that line just there a minimum of 3 times. So that's 1, that's 2, and that's 3, creating a nice strong anchor point. Having tied that timber hitch, I've then threaded the tarp on my center line. I'm going to come over to the second tree to tie a figure of 8 and then back on itself. Having pushed the tarp over to the far end so as to reduce weight in my line, I'm going to bring the rope at tension over to the tree. I'm going to measure roughly about an arm back on myself. Here I'm going to tie just an overhand figure of 8. That creates a loop that I can be using to create tension when I pull back on itself, but also as a figure of 8, it's easy to untie. Having pulled that through, I'm struggling to keep the tension on here, so I'm going to pinch it momentarily. I'm going to pass through again to create a winch. Now that that's holding tight, I'm going to grab it all and I'm going to tie 2 half hitches to just keep it locked off. Now that I've got that taut ridge line, I can bring my tarp across and separate out those corners, ready to be tied down. As I did in part 1 for the low kit shelter, I'm going to be using my handmade tent pegs, but this time I'm going to be using longer lines so that I can maximize the space underneath the tarp by reaching those angles out further. So there we go, a mid-level shelter that you could happily get a group gathered in underneath.